I didn't play a lot of the Skate series growing up. I was a lot more invested in the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater games. The fast and arcadey nature of the series always appealed to me, and I think I was just too young to understand the magic of the Skate franchise. That changed around when I actually started getting into skate culture and got my first couple of boards. I was never very good at skating, but obsessed with it conceptually, and Skate 3 appealed to me a lot for that reason. I played my fair share of Skate 3, but in terms of actually looking in depth at the whole series, the first two games are a huge blind spot for me. So I'm going to give some background on the series and my own personal thoughts. Released in 2007, EA's Skate was an attempt to take the admittedly basically monopolized skateboarding game genre away from Tony Hawk and Activision. And it did just that, handily outselling Tony Hawk's Proving Ground, which was released the same year. Based on some of the comments on my Tony Hawk retrospective, there seems to be a lot of misinformation going around about Skate, Tony Hawk, and the nature of the market at the time. So I want to clarify something. Nail the Trick from Project 8, even though it looks similar to the Skate series mechanically, was not influenced by Skate. It was introduced in 2006, almost a full year before the Skate series even started. Given the close release dates, Proving Ground for that matter was most likely hardly, if at all, influenced by the Skate series. It just kinda seems like that was where the Tony Hawk series was headed regardless. For that matter, a lot of people seem to think these two series competed directly.
A new Skate game was released every year and directly competed with Tony Hawk titles. Each new Skate installment, EA was seeing diminishing returns. Casual skateboarding game fans would buy either a Tony Hawk game or a Skate game, but they wouldn't buy both.
Now, I'm not trying to rag on this person. This video is mostly done well enough, but it has a lot of views, and this just isn't true at all. It is true that the original Skate competed with Tony Hawk's Proving Ground, but if you know anything about the Tony Hawk series, it's well known that after Proving Ground, the series lost their original devs, and the sales figures of the motion control entries Ride and Shred were so low that it's very likely that it didn't cut into Skate's sales at all. I also think that even if Ride and Shred had been gigantic games that sold like crazy, it still wouldn't have affected the sales from Skate very much, as the people who generally bought Tony Hawk games in the years prior stopped when they started to appeal to a more casual audience. I mean, a lot of people stopped buying Tony Hawk games before Project 8 even came out. In fact, if you actually do the work and look into Skate's sales figures, each subsequent entry into the series sold more copies than the last, with Skate 3 being by far the highest selling one. So where exactly does this made-up narrative come from? Again, I'm not trying to sit here and rag on this video, and it's nothing personal to the creator, but it just seems misinformative and poorly researched. I don't really blame them either. This mentality seems to just be spread around by word of mouth or in YouTube comments. But there's only one game in the Tony Hawk series that lost any sales to Skate, and that's Proving Ground. I mean, we're talking about EA here. The truth is, the Tony Hawk series didn't kill Skate, and Skate didn't kill Tony Hawk. That series killed itself. Skate was killed by egregious mismanagement, changing culture and trends, and appealing to shareholders. Anyway, sorry for the rambling nature of that intro. I just had to get that off my chest. Let's take a look at Skate 1. Skate 1 does a great job at introducing everything that's really fun about the series. It's not as polished or nice as its sequels, and gameplay-wise it only improves from here, but Skate 1 lays down a groundwork that's quite impressive. First off, the game opens with a great intro featuring real skaters and capturing the essence of skating culture at the time. It was shot live action, unlike a lot of the Tony Hawk intros, and that further emphasizes Skate's realistic design compared to the Tony Hawk series. My only gripe with this is that it's 10 minutes long and unskippable, but only plays when you start a new game, so it's not such a big deal, and it's charming enough to win me over every time I do see it. This game doesn't really have a story. You're just a skater who gets hit by a bus, then you recover, then you make it to the top. Now, unlike the Tony Hawk series, where I kinda got sick of the games having no story by the time Pro Skater 4 came along, I don't really think this game necessarily needs it. This is a game about skateboarding through and through, and it's deeply rooted in the game's ethos. I also want to say off the bat, I'm not very good at these games. I've tried to avoid it as much as possible, but you'll definitely see some Mongo pushing and just poorly set up lines, so apologies in advance if that bothers you. The gameplay pretty much consists of just doing several different types of challenges, with some being doable at any time while you're skating in the big open world, and some being in set spots. You do enough challenges in the skateboarding mag and for Thrasher, and you beat the game. When you finish all the challenges for the skateboard mag, you get a chance to win Street and Vert Gold at X Games. I think it's a little bit of a missed opportunity you to not have an ending cutscene or something like that. But like I said, it really doesn't matter much. I think the appeal of Skate to me is to drop in and enjoy the open world and put together good lines. This game really nailed the open world right from the start. There's 4 distinct parts of the city to skate in, and each provides something different. Skate 1 also just has a cool vibe to it. I think aesthetically, it's easier on the eyes and more true to its gameplay than Proving Ground or even Project 8. So how is the gameplay? Well, I'm not going to pretend that there isn't any room for improvement that thankfully its sequels capitalized on, but it's still pretty fleshed out. The animations are smooth, your character has a real weight to them, and it's always fun to get as many tricks as you can in a sequence or go for big flips and vert tricks. There's something undeniably charming about this first game, but I can't pretend it's flawless. Most of the challenges in the game are pretty good, but there are a few here that range from slight annoyances to stuff that actually kind of piss me off. Take the follow missions, for example. Yeah, you just follow a guy. It shouldn't be difficult, but sometimes the person you're following bails or gets hit by a car or something, and then just respawns going Mach 5 in the opposite direction. And because you can't get off your board in this game or reposition yourself easily, he's just gone. I think not being able to get off your board in this game was a pretty silly omission. Part of what makes this series great is setting up lines, and it's a lot harder to do when you have to be on your board at all times. It's not much, but it really makes a world of difference when you compare this title to the later 2 entries. I think I have 2 main gripes with Skate 1. The first being that because it was their first attempt at this style, I don't always feel like I'm in full control. Don't get me wrong, the control is pretty good all around, but there are some times where it feels like I'd bail randomly. I might just be bad at these games, but I feel like there's less magnetism to the rails than the future Skate titles. I know the point here is realism, but this is still a video game at the end of the day, so I'm glad they made that decision moving forward. My second problem, and this is probably the biggest one to me, is that a lot of the film challenges are not that fun in my opinion. On paper, I love the idea. It incentivizes 2 different playstyles. You can go talk to people and do photo shoots and contests, or you can find your own spots and set up lines with the film challenges. It sounds like the perfect way to let the player get creative and skate a spot how they want to. The problem is the prerequisites for passing most of them are too strict. This makes it so that for a lot of challenges, especially grind-centric ones, the best thing to do is just go to Old Town and grind and flip trick the curb over and over again. I think if they made the points and grind distance requirements a little more lenient, players like me would be a lot more prone to trying these challenges and more engaging and fun spots around the world. I mean, it's a massive map that's so much fun to skate around. I want to use it, but I also want to get my challenges done without failing over and over again. I think a solution that works for everyone would just be for the game to have difficulty settings, which I'm glad they included later on. This is as good a time as any to mention that this game has a much appreciated fast travel system. It really helps considering it's a little difficult to navigate to some spots on your board alone. That being said, it's kind of hidden. At least it took me until my second time playing the game to realize it was even there, but that's probably my bad. I always appreciate this kind of system in a skating game. It was really nice in Tony Hawk's Underground and Pro Skater 4 too. It helps you get to the meat of the game a lot easier. The best challenges in the game are probably the photo challenges. They give you a spot to hit and usually a very small points requirement, and I feel like this actually gives the player a lot more freedom in how to approach them. There's also Own the Spot, which is pretty similar in that regard. These are usually really fun even when they get challenging. The contests and jams are also pretty fun. The only problem here is that you have 4 skaters hitting the same spots at the same time, and collisions are pretty much unavoidable. It's slightly frustrating, but not really a huge deal. I'm glad that the city is so densely populated with pedestrians and vehicles, but I can't say it doesn't get in the way sometimes. I wish there was an option to turn them off, or at least turn off their collision, but I understand that they were going for a more realistic vibe here. There's also games of Skate, and these weren't super fun or anything, but they didn't really give me any trouble. I think stuff like Own the Spot should have been in the main story instead of film challenges or follow missions, and that would make the game feel a lot more balanced. I don't know, I really like Skate 1. I've actually gone through the skateboard mag missions twice for this video because a lot of my footage got corrupted the first time, and I really enjoyed my time with it. I just think that some of the issues regarding how the game keeps you going forward and provides content to you adds a slight blemish to an otherwise fantastic package. Of course, you can always ignore it and just do whatever you feel like doing at any particular moment. The only reason to do every challenge for Thrasher or the skateboard mag is to get on the covers and X Games. So I mean, if you ever get frustrated with Skate Skate 1, I think you should just play the game however you want to. But I feel like I have to criticize it as a game. And I do expect a game from 2007 to give me a little more than this for beating it. You kinda just don't beat Skate. You complete all the challenges and then get some achievements, and you get this screen that's like, you're an icon. It kinda reminds me of old NES games that would just say, congratulations. I'm not expecting much, but it's hard to want to keep going after X Games for me. That feels like the proper ending. I really appreciate that the game lets you keep playing forever, and I don't think the lack of a real ending or story really sours the experience that much. But it is something I hope they address in later entries. There is a credits sequence that's accessible from the main menu, and it's really cool, showing how they used a mocap animation system, which really shows with the game's incredibly smooth animations. It's a great credits sequence. It looks like they had so much fun making this game, and I love the Cheap Trick song they used for it. Like the Tony Hawk games, they used a lot of licensed music for this game, and there's some great picks here. Skate 1 is a good game. It's an incredibly impressive starting point for the series, and it was enough of a success to cement the series as the hardcore skaters video game. It has its fair share of flaws, but nothing so major it turns a good game to a bad one. Its presentation, animation, brand new control scheme, and huge and engaging world make for a fantastic skating game that you should check out even if you prefer its sequels like me. Speaking of sequels, Skate 2 would come out just 2 years after the first game, and I'd say it's a sequel in the purest definition. It's quite similar to the first, but there's way more content as well as quality of life improvements. You can finally get off your board in this game. Although the control when you're off board is so unbearably awful, you probably will never want to. But definitely still, it helps on occasion, and I'm glad to see it. There's a new challenge map in the pause menu, which kind of streamlines the map system from the first title. I like this new addition, and also being able to see challenges you completed. I enjoyed Skate 1, but I feel like this game is a massive improvement. I might just be getting better at these games as I record them for this video, but around the halfway point of Skate 2, a lot of things started clicking for me, making challenges less of a pain. There are still a few in this game that are quite difficult, and a couple that just wouldn't work until the game felt like it, and that got really frustrating after a while. There was this one that makes you move this rail in between some ramps and trick on all three, and I swear I did it perfectly like 3 times, and the game refused to let me clear the challenge. Let me know if you can see some obvious screw up here, because I can't. Anyway, that's actually a big thing they added in this game that I enjoy. The ability to move props around to help set up your lines. It almost vaguely reminds me of that rigging menu thing from Tony Hawk's Proving Ground, but actually kind of cooler, just because it feels more diegetic and like it actually makes sense, which I suppose fits in line with Skate's more realistic approach. Skate 2 graphically is pretty similar to the first, but there's a noticeable tint and change in art style. Sometimes the lighting is really cool in this game and actually looks great for a 15-year-old 360 game, but sometimes the bloom is a little overdone and over-brightens the image a bit, but I think overall the art style and presentation is still top-notch, just like the first game. Aside from the lighting, the overall art style is pretty grimy and realistic looking, and a lot of people seem to prefer that about the first 2 Skates, and I agree. I think visually the game having this more realistic, big city look to it makes you feel so much more connected to the world. If you watch my Tony Hawk video, you know I harped on Proving Ground for looking so washed out and dull, but Skate 2 is an example of how that sort of setting should look. It also makes way more sense for this series. You're not doing crazy 900 McTwists half a mile in the air and disobeying the laws of physics, at least not to the same degree. So it fits the game to have this sort of setting, and it's something I really appreciate about the series. Gameplay-wise, the control is pretty similar to the first, but it definitely feels quite a bit smoother. It's hard to say what it is exactly, but I didn't ever feel like I was bailing when it wasn't my fault quite to the same degree as the first game. It could also be that I was just getting better at these games as time went on, but I played quite a bit of Skate 3 back in the day, and I'm happy to say that Skate 2 mostly holds up. I say mostly because my problems with Skate 1 and some of its super strict requirements for certain missions are still here. I'm sure I'll get plenty of get good comments, but there's a reasonable challenge and then there's CBT, and that's what this game can teeter on sometimes. It's very rare though. Overall, I had a pretty smooth experience with this game. It has a pretty similar structure to the first, where your goal is to become the best skater in the city by doing tons of challenges. And yeah, that's fine. I know I shouldn't expect much in the way of story or anything in these games, but as someone who prefers to beat games instead of completing them most of the time, Skate 1 and 2 have little in the way of tangible rewards for that. But this game, and this series for that matter, is absolutely made for completionists and achievement hunters, and it provides that in spades. There's just a lot more here, and Skate 2 is quite a bit longer. The world is technically the same city, city as the first game, but it feels way different. It's a lot bigger and more diverse this time around, making this probably the best map in the series. It's fun to even just ignore challenges and skate your favorite spots around the city. San Vanalona is even better this time around and feels like the ultimate map for these games. One thing that comes with having such a realistic feeling city is obviously pedestrians and cars, which I touched on earlier with Skate 1. I don't know if it's just recency bias, but I feel like it was an even bigger problem with this game. Same deal with running into skaters while doing jams, and security as well. Not to harp on this one challenge, but you can imagine my frustration that not only was the game not recognizing me doing the mission correctly, but Big Black also got in my way a lot. Like, dude, you're supposed to be helping. Speaking of Big Black, that's another feature here. When you're skating a spot with lots of security, you can call him to try and distract them, and it works okay for the most part. But yeah, there's a few parts here and there where he kinda gets in the way. This game, like the first, features a great live action intro, and once again you can feel the love put into it. I know I mentioned this before, but I do feel like Skate 2 is at its best when you're just skating in the huge and fun open world. This really is the peak of the series when it comes to its map, even though I disagree that it's the peak of the series in other ways. I feel like Skate 2 is a fantastic game, but doesn't do enough to address some of its predecessor's faults. I mean, the time and energy here clearly went to making its world, gameplay, and mechanics a lot better and more fine-tuned. And I think that was the right choice. But there's still some little annoyances here that, even though they don't come close to ruining the game, will frustrate some players at the same time. Do I recommend Skate 2? Absolutely, it's a fantastic skateboarding game. Do I think it's the greatest skating game ever made? No, but I'm a little biased towards Tony Hawk, and I wouldn't fault anyone for saying it was. Skate 2 is so close to being a perfect skating game, and many argue it's the best we've ever got. And while I respectfully disagree, everyone should play it. It's a damn good game. I might have been a little critical over the first two Skate games, but I want to clarify that that's not because I don't like them. They really are fantastic, and I'm officially a huge fan of the series after playing both back to back. I think there's still a huge chunk of Skate fans out there who have only played Skate 3, and I definitely think that if you're into these games, you should absolutely try to get your hands on copies of these two games. That being said, despite having some very minuscule experience with Skate 1 before starting this video, I've barely played these games at all until this point. Most of my experience with the series was always with Skate 3. I actually played this game around 2010 on PS3 with some friends after we downloaded the demo, and I remember we just took turns in hollow meat mode, diving off of a building over and over again. Sometime later, I got my hands on the full game, and I've been booting it up every couple of years or so ever since. In my opinion, Skate 3 is a huge improvement from the previous two when it comes to gameplay and challenges. Everything about this game just feels smooth. This is also the first game in the series to offer difficulty settings, and as someone who kinda sucks at these games, that's something I'm glad they've included. This is without a doubt the least frustrated I've felt playing a game in the series, and I think the difficulty was just right for me. But there's also hardcore mode, if you want to make the game as realistic and simulation-esque as possible. There's really an option for everyone in this game. This is the first game in the series to take place outside of San Vanalona. The new setting, Port Carverton, is pretty fun to skate in and an overall solid map, but the change from Skate 2's setting is probably the only thing most can agree was a downgrade here. San Vanalona felt a lot more lively and like a real place in the world compared to this. That being said, this is a good map and serves the game just fine. I think that there's a lot less cool street skating parts of the map compared to the first two. They're still here, but the game seems to have a bigger focus on skate parks and big vert ramps, which is still cool, but I miss that emphasis on street skating from the first two. Skate 1 and 2, while taking influence from a number of cities from around the world, feels like parts of their maps are more influenced by northeast cities like New York and Philly, or Midwest cities like Chicago, while Skate 3's map feels quite a bit more homogenous. Port Carverton really feels like a West Coast college town with a crazy unrealistic amount of things to skate on that borders on Tony Hawk territory. It's a good map, just not as good. Back to positives. Skate 3 was the first game I remember in the series running at 60 FPS on original hardware. Nowadays, when you run Skate 1 or 2 in an emulator computer or a new Xbox or something, the frame rate is uncapped and you can finally play them at 60 FPS. But though they were uncapped, the first two Skate games have a hard time ever really meeting that 60 FPS mark on original hardware. This isn't true for Skate 3. Yeah, it dips sometimes, but even on the notoriously poorly optimized and hard to develop games for PS3, it stays at 60 most of the time. I bring this up because even back then Skate 3 felt like the smoothest game in the series. And now with all the other games running at the same frame rate, Skate 3 still manages to feel smoother than the other two. I do think this is the best game in the series from a gameplay standpoint. And playing these games in order after not playing Skate 3 for a while felt like a treat when I made it here. Even the controls for walking without your board are significantly improved. I emulated the first two on PC, but played Skate 3 on Xbox Series X. And running this game at this frame rate with a native 4K resolution looks and feels fantastic. As much as I love all these games, there's a slight clunkiness to them that feels most refined here. The way you progress through the game is pretty similar to Skate 2. The challenge map is back, which I'm glad to see. This time, because of the previous two games, you're already established as a legend, so you and Retta start your own brand. And the goal is to complete challenges and eventually sell 1 million boards. Initially, I thought this game was shorter than Skate 2, but when I got to the 1 million board mark, I realized I'd been playing and recording for like 6 hours. That's how sucked in I was. Just like the other games in the series, this game also lends itself to completionists. And though I didn't 100% any of the games for this video, I know I'll go back and do it for all of them soon. But I really do appreciate how Skate 2 and 3 allow you to choose whichever challenges you want to do. I think I only did one death race in my playthrough of Skate 3 because I think it's one of the worst challenge types, and I still had no problems at all selling 1 million boards. It reminds me of some of the Tony Hawk games and how you can pick and choose certain goals and still see the whole game. I think Skate lends itself to this open approach of objectives. They've also added in a new type of challenge called 1-Up, which is basically Skate, but only 3 letters, and it goes off points instead of tricks. I really enjoy this, and I think it's such an improvement over the traditional games of Skate in the previous 2 games. You can still play Skate in this game, but I only needed to do 1-Up to beat the game, and I think it's way more fun. It's absolutely less realistic than Skate, which is something just about every skater actually plays in real life, but the flick-it system just isn't really precise enough to nail the exact tricks the game wants you to whenever you'd have these challenges in the previous entries. This is less realistic, but more fun, and I feel like Skate 3 follows that ethos in general. The games have never been fully 100% realistic, but they were a stark departure from the Tony Hawk series and occupied a more grounded space entirely. I think little enhancements like this that trend away from realism actually make the game a lot more approachable and fun, and for that reason, Skate 3 has a perfect balance for me. One of these examples is the fact that security is way less intense in this game than the previous entries, and I'm happy for that. A big problem with the other games is that if you had a challenge in a no skate zone and you didn't get the challenge on the first try, the screen would just fill up with security guards that got in your way, even if you hired Big Black in the second game. I didn't have a single issue with security in this game, and there were no rail blockers or anything. That was something in Skate 2 that splits fans, with some saying it's more realistic and adds to the game's charm, but I'm not a huge fan of it. There just seems to be a conscious effort to make this game more appealing, and get as many people into the series as they can, which is a shame considering that 14 years later we still haven't received a sequel. That being said, Skate 1 and 3 are currently available on Game Pass if you have an Xbox One or Series console. Skate 2 is also backwards compatible, but only if you have a physical copy of the game and an Xbox with a disk drive. I've also seen major improvements with getting those games to run on my relatively dated PC with Xenia Canary, a 360 emulator, but your mileage may vary. As I mentioned before, Skate 3 looks and runs incredibly well on Xbox, so if you don't want to emulate, the cheapest way to play these games now is to probably get a cheap secondhand Xbox One. This also has the benefit of being able to play online. That's right, in 2024 I was able to get into a match and play online in Skate 3, and everything seemed to work pretty well. I didn't stay online for long because the people who were on the server were veterans to say the least, but it made me happy to see this community still active. This really is a great series that I had a lot of fun playing for this video, but before I finish up here, I want to give some concluding thoughts on each entry. Skate 1 was an incredible start to the series and a huge achievement for the newer approach to skating games. In my opinion, it has a number of flaws that make it less fun to come back to than the next couple of entries, but nothing that should deter fans of these kinds of games. It has a fantastic map, great controls, and an overall cool vibe to it that makes it fun to come back to, but I wouldn't recommend playing this one first. Skate 2 was an improvement over the first in basically every way. The map is similar, but much improved from the already great map of the first. The gameplay tweaks make the game feel a lot better to play, and the challenges are more fun than ever. This is also the coolest game in the series, the one that really can't be replaced. In some ways, it's even better than Skate 3. And I think that boils down to Skate 2's excellent presentation. The lighting, the different parts of San Venelona, the new features like being able to move props to skate on, made Skate 2 a must-play for skateboarding game fans. Skate 3 is the overall most refined experience and the one I recommend to start with. Everything about this game feels fine-tuned, making Skate 3 the obvious entry point for fans today. It looks great graphically to this day, the control and gameplay is easy to pick up and play but difficult to master, and it's relatively accessible if you have a powerful PC or any Xbox released in the last 20 years. There's been a debate for years about whether Skate 2 or 3 is better, but in my opinion it's really going to boil down to what you prioritize in these games. Do you want to chill out on the couch, do some challenges, and just enjoy an incredibly well-tuned and fun skating game with the least amount of jank? Then Skate 3 is the one you should go with. But if you're more into the immersive nature of the series and want the best map, Skate 2 is definitely the better game of the two. Personally, I prefer the third game, and it's the one I'll probably keep coming back to the most, but I really think you should play all of them. I had a great time playing all these games in a row like this. I did a small poll on my community page asking you guys whether or not you were excited about the new Skate games slated to release next year, and most people said that EA was probably likely to ruin it, and I mean, it's hard to disagree with that sentiment. Right now, I'm really hoping the game turns out great and gets people back into the series, but with the news of it being a live service, free-to-play type game, I'm not fully sold on that. I think what would really get fans of the series back into these games would be native PC ports, especially for Skate 3. That would probably make EA millions, even if they had to change the soundtracks. But it seems like there's no plans for something like that. I hope the new Skate matches up to the series heights, but even if it doesn't, at least I know that these three amazing games will always be around. Thanks for watching. I've been working on this one for a while, but have seen some major life changes in the last 2 months because of Hurricane Helene. So I just want to thank all my subscribers for being patient with my shoddy upload schedule. I know 4,500 subs isn't life-changing, but your guys' support genuinely means the world. And I never thought I'd get this far. So, again, thank you.